Welcome to AWS She Builds Tech Skills with your hosts, Mai and May.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS She Builds Tech Skills. We're here again, and we're all about DevOps for this series of sessions. Now, speaking of DevOps, we have our lovely co-host here, May.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mai. Welcome to the session. How is everyone doing? And let us know where you are joining from. So this week we have DevOps, and Mai, tell us a little bit about the themes and then the topic that we have for this season.
Yes, so the topics for this season is all about DevOps and the surrounding AWS services and if there are any, open source tooling that we can talk about in that process. So it's not just about DevOps, but the surrounding topics there as well. And we have an exciting guest for you soon. But before we get to that, what's been happening around you, May? What's something remarkable that happened in the last couple of weeks?
Last couple of weeks has been amazing. There's a lot happening at AWS. We have Bedrock announced in Sydney region in Australia. So I'm from Sydney, Australia. I can see people joining from Cambodia just in streaming. Welcome to the show. Welcome to our sessions. So it has been a lot of announcement, and I really want to share with everyone today what we have prepared, and also our special guests who are going to do a live demo around the developer tooling. So welcome, and if you're joining the show, please let us know where you're joining from. And the DevOps has been, it has been a topic. It's relatable to a lot of the builders, a lot of developers. And for myself, I come from a developer's background, so this has been a close to my heart. Going back to looking back 10 years ago, and a lot of technology has changed. And today we're gonna see how we will take it to the next level and how we can improve that productivity for builders and developers. Mai, what about you? What's happening in this in your world in sunny side of Australia?
Sunny side of Australia. So I've been doing some demos around a lot around generative AI. But what's surprising, or not really surprising, is that with generative AI services, or in general, it seems to bring all the builders along, and that could be developers, that could be any kind of engineers. It could be a data engineer, it could be an infrastructure engineer, cloud engineer, you name it. So, been doing lots of demos, including Amazon Bedrock and Bedrock Studio that just got released. And I did a fun exercise of using some guardrails, which is like preventing specific topics to be included in the prompt. So, one example. Okay, so if you've been living under a rock, you might not know, but there's been that rap beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Now, I used a topic. Let's say I don't want anyone to talk about Drake, so I put in my guardrails. Hey, you can't talk about Drake. So put that guardrail in there.
I love it. I love it how you apply that.
I did a demo yesterday to a customer, so it went down really well. So I asked the large language model, in this case Claude V3, I think it was Haiku. So I asked it, hey, can you tell me about cats? And obviously it told me all about cats. And then I said, hey, can you tell me about Kendrick Lamar? And it came up with lots of things around Kendrick Lamar. And then I finally said, can you tell me about Drake? And it came up as, no, sorry, we can't talk about Drake. So yeah, those kind of things. So there's really cool things that you can apply to like everyday fun topics for a personal project as well.
Absolutely. And you can see one of the viewer on the show, one of the best use cases of guardrails that I've ever heard of. I love it, Mai. That's very creative. For viewers who is watching the live stream, let us know what fun projects that you have played around with the generative AI. We would love to learn. Like, we would love to hear from you. We have all these, little creative idea that we can play around with it and then be have fun with it and also learn from how we can improve that in our day-to-day tasks. So let us know in the chat in that. So speaking of generative AI, for this season, so if you've been following on She Builds Tech Skills, this is our season 2 and very first episode on season 2. And we're going to have every 2 weeks and a topic around DevOps or developer tooling in that topic. So we'll have another session in next 2 weeks. If you like this session, make sure you come back and join us for the future episode as well. So for DevOps for today, what do we have in store, Mai?
So we have Amazon Q for developers. So this brings the world of generative AI and developers, aka builders. I don't like to say developers because it's not just developers, because it can generate infrastructure as code as well. So Amazon Q for developers is a hot topic at the moment to improve developer productivity. And we have our awesome guest, who is Nicola Smyth, who is a solutions architect within the ANZ Startup Team. So let's bring Nicola on board. Hey, Nicola, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Mai and May. Really excited to be joining you today.
Yeah, awesome. So love to dive into, how did you get to this current role as a solutions architect? So love to hear more around your background.
Yeah, sure. So prior to being in the startup team, I did work as a developer at Envato, software company based in Melbourne, where I'm from. And I did also spend some time working at our postal service, Australia Post, where I was in some development teams, but also worked in their cloud infrastructure team, and really got a taste for working with AWS there and really enjoyed it, and found my way eventually at AWS as a result.
And how are you enjoying your current role as a solutions architect, and what do you like best working as a solutions architect at AWS?
I think for me, part of it is that I do work within the startups team. So you're really getting to have a taste of a lot of different sorts of tech, a lot of different sorts of industries. And I think at the moment, particularly with generative AI, you get to work with customers who are looking to put that into production really quickly. So there's a really fast development process that has to happen, a lot of ideation, a lot of iterating. And so it's a pretty exciting time to be working with lots of different startups, particularly sort of with generative AI at the moment.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, there's lots happening in generative AI, and I'm excited to see what demo you've got for us today. But before we get there, I think May, you've got a few questions.
I do have a question, but I also want to invite a audience on the live streaming as well. If you have any questions for Nicola, put it in the chat. Both myself and Mai are, checking on the chat, and if you have any question, please pop it in there. Nicola, there are a lot of things happening in the market, but I want to know what technology stack that you're currently working with and you enjoy learning these days.
The obvious one is I've been working a bit with Amazon Q Developer, which I'll go into a bit more, when we jump into that demo. So, but aside from that, I know it's probably pretty back to basics, but enjoying working with AWS SAM. I've got a lot of serverless customers, really great tool set for fast deployments as well. So it's a really nice sort of testing and development process I've found working with AWS SAM. And like my testing out a bunch of different generative AI services, particularly Bedrock, getting my hands dirty with some prompt engineering techniques and really trying to understand that process as well has been a lot of fun. And you can, come up with some interesting use cases for it, and really fun sort of services to demonstrate as well.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. Well, I know there are a lot of things happening in the generative AI. How are you keeping up to date with all these new things happening every day?
Oh, it's hard.
It is.
Sometimes I'm getting my news from customers. But I keep up to date by, we have a lot of internal training, and I talk with colleagues regularly who are all really interested in it. I do subscribe to some different newsletters that are pretty interesting. Reddit honestly has some
Yeah.
of the best updates, so always a good place to check. So lots of different news sources, and also some are more tech focused, some are more like use case focused as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, definitely. It's a lot going on. We do have one question from Olivia calling. Nicola, is there anything that's surprising or that you weren't expecting since joining AWS?
Surprising about like the organization is how I'm assuming that was meant. Yeah, I think I didn't expect for such a large organization to have so much like collaboration across different organizations and across different regions. I've been really excited by the fact that you can easily connect with colleagues who might be working in a different region. I connected with someone who was in New York recently in the generative AI space and had a discussion about what she was seeing and what her customers were doing. So it's really great to be able to connect with people, across such a big network of people who work for AWS, and have people be really warm, reach out, and really happy to have a chat. So yeah, I think that's been really positive, since I've joined about a year and a half ago, and I've found that to be the case.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Like, in my experience as well, like if you reach out to someone within AWS and they are willing to help, like any silly questions that I have, I'll be like, put it in the internal channel and people will be willing to answer and help. What about you, Mai? What's your experience like?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like everyone's willing to help. There's a lot of information, so it's just trying to find the right information
Yeah,
across so many internal resources. I think it's that's been a challenge. Yeah.
I definitely agree. Someone on their live streaming also mentioned, I believe that you're saying you keep up to date by refreshing AWS pages for update. I think that's a really good
Yeah.
way. Like all the announcement, like all the
What's
detailed
new?
announcement. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
news? Those are super useful to keep up to date. Definitely. All right. So going back to the questions, Nicola, should we start off with today's topic?
Yeah, sure. So today I'll be talking about Amazon Q Developer. Amazon Q Developer is part of a broader service called Amazon Q, which also has a business component. That's more about enabling different businesses to be able to collate internal documents and information and make that accessible. But today we're focusing on Amazon Q Developer. We've got builders in the audience, so it seems a lot more appropriate. And some of you may have tested out Code Whisperer already, which is a way to get coding suggestions and within your IDE. This has basically merged now with Amazon Q Developer, which is an experience across all different platforms. So you can get, say, coding suggestions in your IDE, but you can also use the chat functionality to ask questions and to troubleshoot within that IDE. And also use it within, say, the AWS console, within Slack, which is honestly what my team uses it for, within the AWS documentation as well. So it's kind of integrated with that whole development process to help speed it up and to help you troubleshoot and deploy more quickly.
Yeah, amazing. Before we go into demo, Nicola, I like to understand what sort of use cases that you've been exploring or like with generative AI for a developer perspective, like what use cases that you have seen in the market?
Do you mean like with Amazon Q or more broadly with
More
generative
broadly,
AI
like generative
services?
AI space to for the developers.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm seeing like if we start with Amazon Q, I am like having lots of conversations with different developers, and I was at AWS Summit presenting and demoing on this, and so I got a chance to have a chat and see how people were using it. People are finding it particularly interesting when it comes to parsing AWS documentation and understanding more about like AWS deployments and infrastructure within their accounts. So I think that's one use case that I'm really seeing quite a lot of. More broadly, with like generative AI services, I'm seeing lots of people using, I know this isn't technically AWS, but particularly with startup customers, they're adopting, say, LangChain and using that in order to integrate it into our like Bedrock models into their applications. That framework I've found is to be incredibly popular. It can help with things like fallback to different APIs. So if you haven't checked out, that framework, could be worth investigating to help you integrate some generative AI models from Bedrock into your applications.
Now that's a really good point, and I've been dropping link in the chat as well. So if you haven't explored Amazon Q, Bedrock, please go and check it out. And well, we're gonna see a demo on the Amazon Q developer side, so I'm really excited for that.
Cool. So kicking off with that next, I guess, I wanted to briefly state, I know May did say it would be live. Unfortunately, the demo gods were not kind this morning. I do have a backup for us, so I will be talking through this as well. But essentially, I want to showcase like how you might implement this in your development flow, from sort of ideating and creating a new feature to actually deploying into your AWS account. So if I've got a repo that I've created, it's basically an e-wallet, so a virtual wallet, and it's got a few different lambdas associated with different functionality. And today I want to build out a new feature, which is listing the wallets that I have within my wallet repository. So to start out, to get a bit familiar with the repository, I'm going to have a look at my stack, and I'm going to ask Q to actually explain what's going on in that stack. So I can have a look. I've got my e-wallet stack, and it's going to give me a bit of an explanation as to what is happening, and it's breaking that down. I've got my Lambda functions, I've got my DynamoDB tables, where the wallets and the information are actually stored. I have a Lambda layer deployed and some other configuration. So now I'm a little bit familiar with what's actually deployed. I'm going to take a look at building out that new feature for list wallets. So I'm going to ask Q to actually create that Lambda handler for me. And like with any sort of generative AI LLMs or code generation models, you're wanting to get quite specific about your prompt, because the better the prompt that you have, the more accurate the prompt that you have, the better the result that you're going to get at the end of the day. So sometimes it can take a little bit of back and forth to get sort of that prompt that you're wanting. So having a look at this Lambda handler that's been generated, I can see it's used that wallet repository. Maybe I want to set up some logging as well. So I've got going to set that up, and it's going to generate some suggestions for me. Maybe not. And so now I can see also, I probably want to check some of the classes that it's set out. So having a look at that wallet repository, I can see that it actually takes in a client and the wallet name. So I'm going to ask for it to generate as well that DynamoDB client. And I've got, and sometimes Amazon Q, you do need to prompt it. So if you use Control-C, it will generate a response for you as well. And now I'm looking to get that table name as well from the environment. And maybe I need to make a few different edits to make sure that I'm happy with the code. So I've edited that. So I'm going to use the get on my environment. So if the table name isn't present, I'm not going to get an error. So I'm updating that DynamoDB wallet repository, and I'm instantiating that. And I can see, I double check that method, list wallets is available, and I want to return, say, a JSON format. I'm returning the status 200 and that wallet's in the body as well. If I were a great developer, maybe I would have done some test-driven development, but as it stands, I've done it the other way around. So I'm going to actually create some unit tests now for my handler function. So I have prepped the file as well for my tests. So I can see here, I've, thinking about what some of the modules are that I need to use. I'm going to actually copy this Lambda function. I'm going to send it to Amazon Q, and I'm going to provide a prompt for what it is that I want to do. So I want to create a unit test, and what I want to do is actually test whether or not that the wallet returns the wallet names, because that's the output that I need. I'm also going to specify what imports that I want to use so that I know that the mocking is consistent with how I've done it before. So I'm going to use the mock DynamoDB library to do this. And so once I've specified what I want in my prompt, it's going to generate an answer for me. And I can test this out now. So if I can have a look, it's explaining to me how the test is going to work as well and what the logic that's been implemented. And I can copy and paste that in. I can see, it's not 100% perfect. I do have to, add in some imports, but the bulk of it is there, and I'm not having to, go to Google, search how do I mock this out, and it's generated it largely for me. I can see I need to add in some sample data. Did have the comment in for it as well to prompt me to do that. And yeah, and so I can see, cool. Oh, no, my test isn't running. So I'm going to run that test and see how it goes. All right, so again, that import isn't quite right. Going to try again, click to run tests. Still got to add in that other import. Cool. And now I can see, all right, so I'm getting an error now that I've got my tests running, and that JSON wallet isn't, the JSON isn't serializable. So I've realized I've got my JSON, my wallet objects available, but I haven't actually made the names available within each of those objects. So I'm going to prompt Q to actually get the list of names from each wallet object. And I can see it's provided the code there for that. So I'm going to return the wallet names and see if that actually fixes the Lambda function and that I get a passing test. All right, so got to match up some attributes. So you can see, whilst Amazon Q, it's not going to get everything perfect, it does mean that I'm not doing a lot of the boilerplate code. I just have to check and validate that things are working as expected. So you can see my amazing typing skills on display.
So we just say, Nicola, I mean, you still need to know somewhat about development or around the programming language of choice. And it improves efficiency with your development, right? It's not a total replacement for a developer, right?
Oh, absolutely not. So it's great. I think particularly for boilerplate code, you need to write a bunch of unit tests. Or, for those times where maybe you're getting an error that's related to sort of AWS and you want to double check what's happening there. Or, you've forgotten how to write something, how do I get this list right? How do I get, and even algorithms it can be used for as well, to give you some prompting around, oh, how would I structure that? How would I write that out? But at the end of the day, you do need a developer there who understands how this is going to work and how this is going to hang together. It can just help you provide you with a bit more context and understanding, and speed up things, so you're not flipping in and out of different consoles as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
totally. I think it's like very much, like for example, when you write a test case, and sometimes like one validation, you have to write maybe 5 test cases to cover all the cases and edge cases. But with I can see with Q help, like Q developer, it can preliminary do all of the work for you, and then you can just like review, like, yes, that's what I want, and no, maybe that's not relevant. So you can just like speed up that process. Like for example, in that test cases, but like you said, Nicola, in the boilerplate code, I reference a lot back to like Google. I reference a lot back to like AWS documentation, even to like install a package, or like if I'm switching from one tool to another, it's a different syntax. So that in that case, it can really help in the generating those code for you. So I it's really it does change the way that we write code. I would say, like a lot of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can offer suggestions as well. So if you're not
Yeah.
100% happy with one of the suggestions, you can
Yeah.
press like the right key and flip through. It offers maybe up to 5 suggestions.
I
So
can I can think of, like, if I were like, a developer, or like junior developer fresh out of uni, like back in the days, and if I can get Q to like give me a best practices to create a function to talk to like DynamoDB, and then like it could save a lot of time just to get it from that code from the queue, rather than like me going and flipping through AWS documentation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think too, like, even if you're not a junior developer, there are some features that are worth looking at. So like it can do security scans for you. So before you've even sort of obviously there are lots of tools around for that, like Sneak and like that, which I see are very popular. But
Yeah.
this way, in your code base, before you've even checked stuff in, it has to go to code
Mm.
review. You can actually do it yourself and have a look and see if there's anything flagged that you can fix before it's uh, checked in.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I guess like within this demo as well, I'm showing you can use it for infrastructure as code as well. So has been trained for CDK and Terraform. So I know my customers, a lot of them use Terraform. So, but yeah, so here just asking it to actually write the function that I need to deploy my code, and it's generated that for me pretty well. Does also pay attention to the context of the file that it's in. So if you have
Mm.
other Lambda functions, it's going to look at that and follow that same pattern. And I can see I've got all my settings done, and I'm going to, try and deploy that. So that obviously often takes a little bit of time. So, yeah, one other thing I did think about while I was sitting there waiting for it to deploy is, are there ways to speed up my CDK deployment? So Amazon Q, you can ask it, infrastructure related questions, things about our different services that you might want to know and be thinking about. You can ask that as well within the IDE. So it's going to go through and it's going to give me a few different suggestions. I think one of them was don't use Python. So that's a top tip maybe for my next demo. I'll try it in TypeScript. And it links to everything that it's actually referencing. So you can go and read the blogs and articles yourself. Yeah, so looks like that's deploying. And then I'm actually going to go through and have a look at what that looks like in the AWS console as well, because Q is available in the console. You can see my resources are updating, the exciting wait for a deployment. It's always, I can see I've got my demo table set up with a couple of wallets available. So when I'm testing, I should be seeing eWallet 2 and eWallet 1. And we go, almost looks like we're updated, and I can go through and check my list wallet function. So I've got this deployed. It's cool. So you can see that's what we just coded with Amazon Q. Going to set up just a test event. I'm not passing through anything in the event, so we can leave that blank. And I'm going to run the actual test. So it's actually failed. And I can see I've got some sort of access permission issue. And I can diagnose that with Amazon Q in the console. So it is available in the console to actually help check and run some diagnostics. I think Lambda is one of the first services that it's been rolled out for. So I know I can go back and actually fix that. So I could have asked Amazon Q there to help me resolve the issue as well, but I kind of knew what it was. So I went and asked, can you create that grant so that my Lambda function can access that table? And I can update that, and then we'll go through and watch that deploy as well. So that's one of the things I think that's really helpful about Amazon Q is that it is integrated with the console, so you can use it there as well and ask about what's happening within your environment. And I know in particular, if you are interested in like the cost management side of things, it can help with the sort of the diagnosing things there as well, which is one use case I've seen come up a few times. So we'll go through, see if it's updated. The waiting. Oh, looks like it hasn't actually updated. Yeah, I thought about filming the perfect demo, but that would have taken too many shots, I think.
I think the more real are, the better, right?
And double checking the permissions. Have they updated? I think everyone's been there being like, hurry up and update.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still deploying.
Always the permissions, right?
Yeah, it's always the permissions.
And it never is like, it's always something missing for me. Like if I pushed through some code, it's always like, no, there's something missing that I need to go and fix.
Double checking it. Oh no, I forgot to import something again. All right, so it's running and I can see I'm passing through both the list of wallet names. So yeah, that kind of brings me to the end of that demo, and hopefully everyone's got the opportunity to understand, how it can be integrated within, different parts of that development flow.
Yeah. And with that, we do have a question from the audience. Liquid Surya, do we just use the latest feature of DynamoDB resource-based policies?
I wasn't even paying attention to that. That's very
no,
good.
neither was I. Someone's on the ball. Yeah, I think we did.
Because I think it launched not long ago, maybe, but it was pretty recent feature.
Yeah, it was a very recent feature. Wow, Liquid Surya, you're keeping me on my toes.
I need to go back and watch that video. Nicola, did you use the resource-based policy? I wasn't sure.
When I set up the table, no, I did not. To answer your question. So that's something I could add back in. Thank you. I'll feed that back into my demo for next time.
No, that's
we do have a couple of questions from my side. So can you talk a little bit around customizations? Is that available for Amazon Q for Developer, and how does that work?
Yeah, so customizations, it is in preview. And so what it does is essentially it allows you to customize the Amazon Q developer model so that if you say want the recommendations to be more consistent with your style and the code base within your organization, that way it allows you to do that. So I think it's a really interesting feature. I probably, you need to have a number of repos available to actually train it appropriately. But what customization does is it actually gives you a score. So it'll rate you, give you a rating of like how well the customization is actually going to work. So you can actually test it out if you've got access to those repos and are able to upload them to S3. You can run that and see how good that customization is going to be for you and decide whether or not it's something you want to test out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so maybe if you're a large enterprise customer, you might be looking at that, or if you have a huge code base, then that's something to look at as well. And you spoke a little bit around security scanning. Can you tell me a little bit more around some of the security features of Amazon Q for Developer?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's like two components to that question. So there's obviously the scanning available within your IDE to pick up any sort of common and known security flaws within coding. The other aspect of it that we do get asked about a lot is, if I'm using Amazon Q Developer, what's happening to my data? Where is that going? Do I retain ownership of the code that I'm generating as well? In answer to that, yeah, like you retain all ownership. Yeah, sorry, that was a bit unceremonious. You retain ownership of all the code that you're generating using Amazon Q. And if you want to opt out of sending any data that could help improve the service, you can. That's for the free tier. For the professional tier, it automatically doesn't send any of that data for like improvement purposes.
Yeah, that definitely makes
Yeah.
sense. Which is fair enough.
I think that's taking me to the next question. How you talk about the free tier and then the professional? How does it works?
Yeah, sure. So with Amazon Q Developer, there's a couple of different tiers. So you can use the free tier. So you need a builder ID to use that essentially. And that there are some restrictions around that, so you won't necessarily get all of the features. Customizations, unfortunately, doesn't fall within that, for example, and there is a limit on the invocations as well. But if you're wanting to just test it out and have it in your own IDE personally, I think it's a really good way to get started. There is also the professional license, there are some prerequisites for that. So you do have to be within an organization, and it is managed through Identity Center. So in order to get that started, you kind of do need those two prereqs. And the documentation does lay out pretty well how to actually go through and add those subscriptions to different users.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's a really good explanation on the pricing, just to understand what features comes with free tier versus on the enterprise tier.
Mhm.
I guess there's also a question from the audience. So from IM Wash, for a small enterprise customer, what does the upgrade path look like for scale? Is it skill in terms of adopting Q developer within the engineering team? That's how I'm interpreting.
Yeah, okay. Like I'll happy to
If
interpret it that way as well. In terms of what the upgrade path looks like, so we do find, often with the free tier, it'll be individuals that have kind of just signed up themselves, got testing in the console, and go from there. Then when, say, an organization wants all of their developers to use, say, Amazon Q, then you would have to go through and actually subscribe. So in the Amazon Q console, you're able to subscribe, and then you have to assign those permissions through the Identity Center. If you're, kind of doing it at scale, there's a couple of neat features as well that you'll want to enable around like tracking usage and monitoring how the service is actually being used. you can actually see, say, like how many of the suggestions have been adopted, like the coding suggestions, how many have been adopted by your developers. So if you want to see if the services are actually useful for your teams, you'll have that data as well as you're rolling out the service.
Yeah, I think that's really useful as a data point, right? Like you enable maybe like selected number of developers just to do a small proof of concept to see if that's useful,
Yeah.
and then keep track of that data to see like actually maybe like 50% of your developer adopted to the generated code versus the different metrics, the data points to make the navigations on that path. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's very much how what an Australian customer, NAB, did it, and their story, they actually spoke about it at our recent summit, so that's on YouTube as well. But essentially, they tested it out with some teams and then rolled it out to more development teams as they saw that it was being used and people liked using it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. I am Wash. I'm glad that we answered the questions. So hopefully that was helpful. And in terms of the queue, I guess what are the few features that we should be like looking out for? Like I know, Nicola, you talk about code generation and security scanning. What other like top features or like very high level? What do you think like queue that it's really interesting for people to start diving into it?
Yeah, I mentioned already, I think the integration with like AWS documents is like one of the key things that I really like. Often I get the feedback, hey, AWS docs are great, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
How do I find the information that I need? And integration with Slack, if you're using Slack, has actually been really useful, actually, just for particularly questions when you're like, what versions are available for this particular service, or like those sorts of questions which are a bit annoying and you don't want to spend a lot of time looking for it. I find the Slack integration where you can ask about different AWS services really, really helpful, actually. And I use that regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's super useful. Like in the past, I have seen like Slack integration like manually, but with Q, you can ask very specific questions about
Yeah.
their AWS resources. So that's super helpful. One question for me, and I think you show Python in your demo. What are the other languages the Q is supporting for the developers?
It's actually supporting quite a few now. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. I should have prepped the list. They are on the Q page as well. But I know the initial ones to roll out were Python and Java, but we do support like Node, TypeScript. I looked up the other day, Kotlin, Swift is available for iOS development, and the list just keeps on growing. So a lot of the common ones, Ruby, where I worked previously, we use Ruby. So a lot of the really common languages that people are using have been added in, and more and more languages are being added every time I look at the page. So if you're curious, take a look.
Yeah, awesome.
I wanted to ask one more question around probably another feature around Q developer around code transformation, right? With a lot of customers, especially enterprise customers, having legacy code bases, like on Java, for example. Have you seen customers use the Q code transformation feature to get rid of technical debt, like some of the old Java runtimes, etc.?
Yeah. So Q code transformation is available to transform repos from Java 8 to Java 17. So Amazon used it internally and actually converted like 1,000 applications in a couple of days. Obviously, that's Amazon speaking, so I know people might take that with a grain of salt. I personally haven't spoken with customers, but I have spoken with a number who are very keen to try that out because it is a significant concern, particularly for large enterprise. So if you've got, I'll be, keeping up to date with that and sharing any case studies that come out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know I've seen a lot of customers with deprecated runtimes, especially on Lambda. So that could
It comes
potentially.
in very handy.
Yep. Yeah. One thing I do see people using it for is, say, if they have something written in one language and they're wanting it in another language as well, if they're doing sort of a migration, that's what it can be useful for. But yeah, in it. And I think there's an upcoming feature, I don't think it's been released yet, of helping migrate as well .NET workloads to Linux as well. So could be of interest to some people.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Awesome. I know we're getting close to the time. So if anyone on the stream have any question from Nicola or a Q developer, please drop it in the chat. We've been streaming this for a number of years now. But we've been regularly streaming, and now we are streaming every 2 weeks for this season. It's going to be a DevOps. So if you missed out on the previous season, last season we talked about the community members and how the community builders and AWS heroes are contributing to the community. Please go and check it out on the Twitch channel. And we also have AWS YouTube channel that we posted the previous sessions as well. For those who don't know, we have a podcast. So shameless plug, we do have a podcast on all the major platforms. So Spotify, Apple, whatever podcast platform do you use, you can go and listen to their previous episode. So with that, Nicola and Mai, thank you so much for joining our show. Nicola, especially building the demo and talking through a Q developer, lots of interesting topics. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. And Mai, as always, thank you for hosting the show. And we will be back next week. Not next week, in 2 weeks. So sorry. In next two weeks. And we're going to talk about DevOps and anything around generative AI and DevOps and developer tooling. So please stay tuned for that.
See you next time.
See ya.